the event today will take place in the following format. The first 30 minutes, Soe Tjen Marching will have a talk and present about the motivation and background to her novel Dari Dalam Kubur. And apologize my pronunciation in Indonesian. I would have to take a course with someone if they would teach me later. And this will be guided, or after, Veronica will follow up with some questions. And then we will introduce the floor to the audience so that you could ask the questions you might have for Soe Tjen Marching, and yeah, if questions pop on during discussion, you could keep them to yourself and write them in the chat box later. And also you could use the interaction buttons if you feel to send a heart or a smile during the talk. So our guest speaker today is Soe Tjen Marching, our special guest, and she's a lecturer in the Southeast Asian Studies Department at SOAS London. And she's also connected to the history of the Indonesian genocide in a personal way. Her father was imprisoned, and for many years, her family did not talk about the details and reason for this imprisonment. Soe Tjen will talk about her novel, Dari Dalam Kubur, which is in English From Inside the Grave, which is published last year in 2020. And the culmination of many interviews she had with victims from the era who remain reluctant to also talk about it. So really excited to have you on board today. And the other person here is Veronica, if you could wave. Is a colleague at Correspondence of the World. As half Austrian and half Indonesian, she has published an interview with her grandfather on the 1965 genocide on our website. And she will be today's moderator. So it's a pleasure to host this event with a very relevant discussion. And thank you all so much for joining us from all over the world. So now the floor is yours to Veronica, but also to Soe Tjen to share her screen and start her talk. Thank you.
Yeah, Soe Tjen, I think you can share now your presentation.
Okay, should I start now?
Yes, please.
Right, where is it? Here it is. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about, but then, after this, you're welcome to ask me anything really in relation to 65, or, if you want to ask about my family as well, I don't mind, okay? Right, so I assume that not everyone here knows the background of this event, so I'm going to talk a bit about the historical background. So I'm going to talk. So I'm sorry if some of you probably know about this, because this is going to be basic. Yeah, at the beginning, it's just because this is not an academic event, so that's why I just assume that everyone here is from anywhere, basically from any background. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Cold War first. And that started at the end of the World War II. Indonesia was independent in 1945, but the Netherlands only acknowledged the independence in 1949. Now, Sukarno at that time did not want to side with the left or the right, with the East or the Western blocs. He didn't want to. So in 1955, he and the representatives from 29 governments of Asian and African nations gathered in Bandung, West Java. From this conference, Sukarno and several other world leaders established a political alliance called the Non-Aligned Movement. However, the US government wasn't happy. In the early 1950s, the US started to be aware of the abundant natural resources in Indonesia as well as surrounding areas. If Indonesia fell out of the American influence, these rich neighbors might follow. Yeah, like the Malaysia, whatever, the Southeast Asian nations. That's what the American government was frightened about. This means the loss of natural resources for American businesses. For them, this was like a domino effect, because Indonesia was a quite big chunk, big nation. And if they could not control Indonesia, then they were afraid that the other surrounding nations would not be able to be controlled as well. And because Sukarno had the non-bloc alliance, then the American government thought, oh, this man cannot be controlled. he is dangerous. That's what they thought. Yeah. So anyone who cannot be controlled by the American government at that time was worrying for them. Okay. And at that time, several American businesses tried to negotiate with Sukarno regarding the exploration and mining of natural resources in the country. Sukarno said, fine, but he wanted 70% for Indonesia and 30% for the foreign businesses. And this division was supported by the Indonesian Communist Party. So Sukarno at that time was supported by PKI or PKI, the Indonesian Communist Party. But now what happened was, now we came to the 1965, yeah? The murder of 6 generals on the 30th of September 1965. And the communists, the Indonesian Communist Party was accused as the culprit. And this incident was known as the G30S, G30S or Gestapo. And the new order said that the PKI tried to carry out a coup d'etat against the government, against Sukarno at that time, which was quite strange because the PKI was so supportive of Sukarno. Then Suharto became president, but the letter of instruction is lost. So Suharto claimed that Sukarno instructed him to control the situation, and then Suharto could become the president. But the instruction was lost, which was really, really weird. Now, why now we said that the American government was involved? Yeah, because the documents that used to be classified, that used to be secret, have been opened with this declassification. Okay. If you don't know what declassification is, I'm going to explain. So declassification means that documents that used to be classified as secret cease to be so. Different countries have different rules about this. Sorry, this is a typo. So not many different documents are declassified up to 10, 25, 50, and 75 years in America. Yeah. And in the UK, it's usually after 30 years. In America, it's 10, 25, 50, and 75. And 2015 is 50 years after 1965. So thousands of documents were declassified. But it doesn't mean that even after 75 years, all documents are declassified, only some chosen by the government at that period. Yeah. So this is one of the examples. This is sent by the American Foreign Office to the embassy. Basically, they said that there has to be a kind of civil war in Indonesia, and the communists had to be the culprit, something like that. In general, that's what they say. So they were planning already before September 1965. They were planning to kind of like start a civil war in Indonesia to get rid of the Indonesian Communist Party. Now, this is the support of the US government. Since mid-1950s, the American government was already worried of the growth of Communist Party in Indonesia. And October until November 64, the CIA proposed to use propaganda to stigmatize the PKI as a dangerous group. The CIA would encourage individuals to get ready to take destructive actions against the PKI. In December 1965, the CIA purchases and delivers $500,000 worth in communication equipment to the Indonesian army. And we've found out about this from the declassified documents. Yeah, so we were not making this up. And then, of course, there was the support of the British government as well. Like the US government, the British government feared a communist in Indonesia. And then a Foreign Office document states a premature PKI coup may be the most helpful solution for the West, provided the coup failed. So this is from the document, the British document, and you can check this document in the National Library. And that's why recently, actually, Kartika Sukarno, the daughter of President Sukarno, wrote an article in The Guardian. Not sure whether you have read it, but you can Google it. Yeah. And she demanded that the British government apologize. I also demanded that the British government apologize on The Guardian as well. You can Google it if you want. But so the American, the British, the Australian governments were involved in the coup. And they actually sent a lot of money to the Indonesian army. Yeah. And now this is what happened, 65 until 67, the murder of millions of communists and alleged communists. And the survivors of the and the family remain stigmatized in Indonesia. Okay, and then after that, after 65 and Suharto was in power, remember I told you Sukarno wanted the division of the natural resources. It's 70 and 30, 70 for Indonesia and 30 for the Western businesses. After Suharto was in power, can anyone guess the division for the Indonesia and the foreign companies? Can anyone guess? Just put it on the chat. What's the division? So I'm going to write it on the chat. And the division, what Sukarno wants, yes, 10 to 90. Yeah. So before it's 70 to 30, 70 for Indonesia and 30 to the foreign companies. After Suharto, it's only 10 mainly for the Suharto's cronies, yeah, not even for the people. 10% mainly for Suharto's cronies. That's why they can be really rich, extremely rich. Even now, they're still really rich. And 90% for the foreign businesses. So they're happy, yeah, they're really happy with that. And for that, they just claimed at that time, oh, the murder of the millions of people was kind of worth it. It had to be done. And in Western mass media, there was news of the murder, of this mass murder, but it was written as something really light, that it had to happen, something like that. You know, this Indonesia, or something happened in Indonesia, but it had to happen. That's it. Now, and during the New Order period, the survivors and the family of these political prisoners remain stigmatized. And the former political prisoners have special stamps on their ID cards. ET, you know, ex-political prisoner, there was a stamp. And the children and grandchildren of these political prisoners had problems attending state schools and finding jobs. So it was not a good life, really. They suffered a lot. And to get any document, it was such a drama. It was such a pain. I experienced it myself too, okay? Now, I'm talking about the involvement of China now in this event. In 1960, the Sino-Soviet split started and the PKI sided with Beijing. In early 65, China encouraged President Sukarno to establish the Fifth Force, arming peasants and workers. And the date of the murder of the 6 generals coincides with the Chinese National Day, the 1st of October. So that's why there was a suspicion that China was involved in the coup, in the so-called PKI coup, in the alleged PKI coup. Yeah. And the US Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, wrote about the event of the 1st of October in a telegram to the US Embassy in Jakarta on the 2nd of October. IDIT was the head of the PKI at that time. IDIT and the PKI were under heavy pressure from CHICOM, Chinese communists, to produce abrupt and prompt victory for Chinese communist interests in Asia. So actually, the US admin accused China of getting involved in the murder of the generals and the coup. However, recent findings by Tao Mo Cho reveals that while China did offer to help Sukarno with small arms for the Fifth Force, these small arms had not arrived prior to the murder of the general, prior to G30S. Yeah? There has been no indication or evidence that China had knowledge about the murder of the generals prior to the incident. No knowledge whatsoever. It was actually the American government who had the knowledge that something might happen. So they mention it on the document, yeah, that there has to be a PKI coup, but the coup had to fail. And that was in the document, in the American government's document. However, many Chinese Indonesians were targeted then. Chinese Indonesians split it into the group that was pro-Beijing and pro-Taiwan at that time. And besides this, there were other divisions. One of them was Peranakan, those who mixed more with the local people and usually could not speak much Chinese language. And the other one is Totok, those who retain Chinese identity. The main target was, of course, the Totok Chinese who were pro-Beijing because they were accused of being involved in the coup and the murder of the generals, yeah, because they could speak the language and they were related to Beijing. That's the accusation. Although not always, yeah, because this is the ridiculous thing. Not always, because they only aimed at people who look Chinese rather than, you know, maybe they weren't. And I question the division of ethnicity myself. Because for me, ethnic identity can always be challenged and can always be questioned. Yeah, everyone in a way is mixed, and you know, our ethnicity is really subjective, and it's just really not just not objective at all, the issue of ethnicity. But anyway, let's get back to this. And I'm going to talk about people who considered as Chinese Indonesian and whose family had been victimized. Okay, and one of them is Shinta Miranda. She's my good friend, actually, a good friend of mine. So her parents and aunts were persecuted. She was born in 1955 in Jakarta. Both her parents, so you can see from the names that they were not the so-called, you know, Totok. They were already mixed because of the names. They were actually, they had been in Indonesia for generations and generations. So the father is called Freddy Teo Yuikot, yeah, and the mother is Betsy Tan Xuan Nyo. And Shinta's father, Freddy, was journalist for Antara News Agency. He didn't get involved in politics at all. He was detained in 1966. He and his family did not have any idea why Freddy was imprisoned and tortured. Freddy was released after less than 1 year, but the brutality of the torture made him paralyzed. And Shinta's mother was lecturer of English literature at Atmajaya University, lost her job. So Atmajaya University fired her. Two of her aunts, the sisters of Shinta's mother, were imprisoned. Now, Wee Huim Hui, yeah. Wee Huim Hui was born in Malang in 1938. He was a journalist for Trompet Masyarakat, which was not left or right. However, he was imprisoned and was sent to Buru Island. So this was also another thing which was you know, weird things happening there. And Wee Huim Hui was also Peranakan because his mother was actually mixed, and his family had been in Indonesia for generations as well. But he was also imprisoned. So not always the Totok. And there were other people who were considered as Chinese because they just looked Chinese, and they were also imprisoned and tortured. And from my interviews with the political prisoners, many of them witnessed that people identified as ethnic Chinese were treated more badly. Two non-ethnic Chinese who were political prisoners in the 1965 told me something similar. The first is Puji Raharjo, who was imprisoned from 65 until 78. He said that the guards always wanted to get more from Chinese people, either money or information or both. They were usually punished more severely. The other is Leo Mulyono, born in 1945 in Central Java. Leo was imprisoned from 65 until 79. When he was in Wirogunan prison, there were several prisoners from ethnic Chinese background. And this is what he said to me. Some prison guards often barked, "Where are the Chinese?" With the tip of their bayonets, they lifted our chins one by one, identifying the ethnic Chinese. Raymond Solong said, "I'm not Chinese, I'm Manadonese." Many people from Manado look Chinese, indeed. But he was still asked to go forward. Then they picked another Chinese, and the two of them were ordered to fight and punch each other. The officers watched while laughing. If they did not fight properly, or if the officers thought they were not hitting the opponent hard enough, they would be beaten up by the officers. Peng Han was one of them. He didn't really want to hit his friends, so he was punched and thrown against the spiky fence. His body lacerated all over because of this. But he was really tough. He got up, then whispered to us, "That was just practice to make my body stronger." Later, we met again on Buru Island. So from several witnesses, actually, they said that the Chinese people were treated more badly. Now, discrimination against ethnic Chinese during the New Order period continued. They have to change their Indonesian names. They have to acquire document of citizenship. This is during the New Order. Yeah. The government implemented an assimilation policy prohibiting anything considered Chinese. Printed matter in Chinese characters fell under the category of prohibited imports like narcotics, pornography, and explosive when entering Indonesia. So that's how bad it was. Any Chinese character, even the Chinese character was anti-China, it doesn't matter as long as it's Chinese character. The officers couldn't read anyway, so anything that looked Chinese. The funny thing is the Japanese character was sometimes included, or Korean, or, you know, because they were blind, right? These people, they didn't know, and they said, "What's this?" And my friend actually one time tricked them because she came from Singapore, and she didn't realize there was the book, you know, she brought from Singapore, and there was like a bit of Chinese character. And they said, "Oh, no, there's actually Japanese. This is Japanese." And then they said, "Oh yeah, fine, okay, fine." But it was actually Chinese, yeah, Chinese character. So yeah, so it's quite funny. But what I saw was many Chinese Indonesian former political prisoners do comparatively well compared to, I mean, I'm talking about generalization, not all, of course, but in general, they did better than those so-called indigenous counterparts. Yeah. When I asked my father or his friends, they said, "Oh yeah, because Chinese people, they work harder." I didn't trust them. Okay, they just said, "Oh, we better, we work harder." I didn't trust them. I just didn't trust them. I thought there must be something else. Not that easy. Come on. Okay. So anyway, the easiest way was, of course, talking to my father's and my mother's friends, but never trusting them 100%. As I said, my father was a political prisoner as well. And when I was young, my family did not tell me about his imprisonment. Eventually, when my mother and sisters told me, some of them mentioned that he was imprisoned because he was Chinese. Yeah. That's what I believed when I was young. He was imprisoned because he was Chinese. My story was not the only one. I remember when I was young, I had a chat with, I was probably 10 or 11. I had a chat with my best friend at that time. And it turned out that my best friend's father was also imprisoned in 1965. And then I asked her, "So your father was in prison too? Why?" Not sure, but probably because he was Chinese. She said like that. And then I said to her, yeah, my father too. It was because he was Chinese. So there was this kind of like this. We felt like we're in the same boat because we were Chinese, then we were prosecuted. Yeah. But that was not really true. Yeah. Because Chinese was like only the impact of them trying to find the communists in Indonesia. But their main aim was also, of course, the communists. However, because during the New Order, it was so hard to discuss communists. Even the word communist was not allowed to be mentioned. I was not allowed to say communist by my family. Don't say the word. Never ever say the word. So that's why for them it's easier to say your father was imprisoned because he was Chinese. It was just a much easier narrative for them. And I think it happened with my friend. We never talk about it after that. We talk only once and then that's it. And with the family, it was like that too. That's what I found. Yeah, so they were imprisoned because they were Chinese. And only much later on, I found out that my father was a member of, not only a member, he was actually one of the community members of the Indonesian Communist Party in Surabaya, only in 2016. I found out about it, 2015 or 2016, I think. I can't really remember the year, but only recently, basically, that I found out my father was a member of the Indonesian Communist Party. Before then, I didn't know. Okay. Now, because of this, the bond of many Chinese communities was quite strong. Another reason was the Chinese schools were banned in 1966. So that's why it added to the belief that 1965 and 66 for this Chinese community was actually persecution against Chinese people as well at that time. They had that belief. And the former students and teacher often held reunion afterwards. Even now, my mother still meets with her high school friends. You wouldn't believe how close they are. Chinese language and cultural expression were banned during the New Order era. And this is why, there was this kind of conviction amongst the Chinese communities. What happened then was like persecution against Chinese people. And looking at my mother's tie with her friends, with the high school friends, of course, before I thought it was normal. Yeah, but now after I compare my mother with the other elderly people, it's actually really special, the bond. It's incredibly special. They're really close. So they know who need their help. My mother's 80, how old is she now? My mother 84. My mother is 84 now. So her friends are about 84 and 85, but they still get together. Yeah, every 2 or 3 months, they still get together. If they hear that one of their friends is ill, they go there. And in the community, if someone is more well off, they will help the people who are not that well off. It's always like that. It's incredible, their bond. It's amazing. Yeah. And my father was not stigmatized by his community. Why? Because they believed that he was imprisoned because he was Chinese. So the community actually sympathized with him. He actually received a lot of help after he got out of the prison. So we were poor when we were young. I remember my sisters told me we could barely eat. I can hardly remember that I could barely eat when I was young because I was too young. But my sisters, I'm the youngest in the family, and I was born after my father was released from the prison. But my sister used to tell me that my mother, to feed the children, my mother could afford only 1 egg for 3 kids. And she had to divide this egg for 3 kids, and vegetables and rice. And the rice, she could not even cook rice properly. She had to make it into porridge. So it was enough for 3 children. So my mother could not even feed my elder sisters and brother properly when we were young. And my mother said, you know, when you were born, actually, you weren't fed properly either. So my mother was also quite worried about my growth because I wasn't also fed properly. But because my father received a lot of help, then our economics was in a way improving quite quickly. My father was an accountant, worked as an accountant, and one of his first customers was the owner of one of the biggest restaurants in Surabaya. I mean, can you believe it? As a new accountant, you got that kind of, you know, customer. It was just like, you know, you have to be an accountant for years to get this kind of customers. But no, he just opened it and then that's it. Yeah. Suddenly he got like big customers. And that was, of course, a big help for him. And I saw this with other former political prisoners of ethnic Chinese. They got help from their Chinese friends. And many of them also try to earn money in informal sectors, yeah, the Chinese-Indonesians, because the formal sectors were blocked. They couldn't go to politics, they couldn't go to education, and they couldn't go to formal sectors. So they went to informal sectors. And the formal sectors were easily controlled by the government and were even spied on by the military. And because they were in informal sectors, they could help their friends who were stigmatized more easily, much more easily than people in informal sectors. So what I saw from the non-Chinese were, they were stigmatized by their communities. Yeah, they were not invited to weddings. They were, you know, they found hard to find jobs. And, you know, in Indonesia at that time, connection was really important. If you want to find jobs, if you want to do a lot of things in Indonesia, even now it's still important. But at that time, during the New Order, when I was young, it was crucial. Yeah. So community was crucial at that time. And the Chinese community did not stigmatize. Again, I was talking about generalization. Not all of them are like that. But in general, they did not stigmatize the former political prisoners. They helped them. Yeah. And because they were in informal sectors, then they could do it more easily, much more easily. And that's what I saw. Yeah. So it's not because Chinese work harder and they were better. Okay. But what are the impacts? Suspicions and tensions amongst people considered Chinese and non-Chinese were really high during the New Order. The Chinese communities were often exclusive. This was in a way true because they felt that they were persecuted and they had to help each other. Yeah. So they were I remember my parents always said, are they Chinese or not? You know, when they wanted to help people, when we were already quite okay, and then people needed help, they were always like, were they Chinese or not? And if they're not Chinese, they would help, but they were kind of like not, it's a bit half-heartedly, to be honest, because they felt Chinese people suffered more. That was in their mind. If there were Chinese people who needed help, they would give anything. Yeah, so that was the difference. And because they felt they had to protect their own kind against others, yeah, there was that feeling. And racism is still widespread in Indonesia now, really widespread. And I mean, you saw it with Ahok and what happened to him, yeah. So, but how about the women? Now let's talk about the women. Most of the political prisoners were men. Women were very few, and they usually did not talk. However, rape usually took place when the prisoners were female of ethnic Chinese. This happened to Shinta Miranda's aunts. I actually got in touch with one of them, but after several emails, then she said, I really can't stand it. I can't stand it. It was just too much for me. she said. So in the end, I stopped the interview. I never want to push people if they don't feel comfortable talking to me. Never. I'd rather not continue, because I wrote the book not only for myself, but also for these people. Yeah, so for me, it was crucial that they were comfortable with me. So that's what happened. One of Shinta Miranda's aunts said that she was going to tell me a story. After several email exchanges, she told me she was too depressed and too traumatized. She was not the only one. Many women, especially of ethnic Chinese, still conceal their pain because of the shame and stigma, the risk of being labeled as a liar, and the possible repercussions for not only themselves, but also their families. So I cannot get any story directly from women identified as Chinese-Indonesian, actually. I met a woman of ethnic Chinese who said that, okay, I'll tell you my story. And then she didn't say anything. She was just shaking and cried, and then that's it. She couldn't speak. She just couldn't say anything. And then I just had to leave her, because I knew it was too much. If it was too much, then it was too much. I'd rather not continue. Yeah. And then there was a woman with gray hair who was not identified as Chinese, who said to me, I will tell you as much as I can about myself, but please do not publish it. But when she told me about herself, she also mentioned that Chinese-Indonesian women were treated more cruelly in prison. Yeah. So originally I wrote about the account of survivors and children and grandchildren, and this was the book that was published by Amsterdam University Press. But how about the stories of those women who could not speak, who asked me not to publish their stories? Decades after the mass murder of the alleged communists and the left-wing sympathizers, the victims are still not able to tell their personal stories without any risk. So what does this say about the New Order legacy? Suharto has stepped down, but the cronies remain. This is what I can conclude. Yeah. The victims are still afraid. So, of course, after the publication of my book, there was still a lot in my mind. Stories of women who told me not to publish it. Not to publish the stories. There was still a lot in my mind. So what did I do? What should I do? So the gray-haired woman's story finally found a way in fiction, as she becomes one of the characters of my latest novel, Dari Dalam Kubur, From Inside the Grave. With her consent, I gave her a pseudonym, I changed her age, place of residence, etc. I also made her Chinese, finally. Yeah. So she was but I made her Chinese because I thought, well, if the story of Chinese-Indonesian women could not be out, then at least I could guess what had happened to them. I could at least guess. That's what I was thinking. However, even as fiction, her story still had to undergo a long struggle. My novel was first accepted for publication by Gramedia at the end of 2018. Nevertheless, a few months later, Gramedia told me that some details had to be altered or even omitted, because the sharp criticism against the government, the Suharto cronies, or certain religious groups. This includes the story of that gray-haired woman. Yeah, so this is quite really bad for me, because even as fiction, I couldn't say what I wanted. That was really such a sad thing for me, and it says a lot about Indonesia now. It says a lot about the New Order cronies, how powerful they are in Indonesia, still, even now. Yeah. Now, this is one of the sections that Gramedia wanted to delete, but this book was finally published by Margin Kiri. It's much smaller publisher, but Margin Kiri promised not to cut it, not to delete anything. So that's why I decided to leave Gramedia. And so setelah semalam dia mengunyah tubuh-tubuh kami dengan puas dan bernafsu, esoknya dia meminta kami duduk mendengar petuahnya tentang ketuhanan, kemanusiaan, dan keadilan, tentang bagaimana bejatnya diri ini. Bagaimana kami harus menjadi manusia yang bermoral dan beradab. Suaranya menggelegar. Ulang kata-kata saya, Pancasila. So basically, this is about, this is a translation. This is about a God who, after raping these women, the God called the women and said, oh, the God scolded them and said, oh, you just immoral, you a prostitute, you have to learn about God, about religion, about humanity and justice. Yeah, so the next morning he asked us to sit and listening to his preaching about God, humanity and justice. He talked about how depraved we were and how we have to become more moral and civilized persons. His voice echoes like thunder. Repeat after me, Pancasila. So Pancasila is the philosophy of Indonesia. It's considered sacred, and usually they claim that the PKI, the communist people, are against Pancasila. Yeah. So this section had to be omitted at that time. And in the end, I'm glad actually I published my novel with Marjin Kiri. Okay. So that's it. Please ask me any question.
Thank you, Soe Tjen, so much for this very insightful and also very personal presentation. I'm actually also quite stunned to hear that you were not able to interview more female Chinese Indonesians. And, although you said your last book is The End of the Silence, but for female and Chinese Indonesians, this is not the case yet. The silence still continues. So I'm just wondering, what can be done specifically for the Chinese Indonesians, or what has the government done as individuals to raise awareness of what happened to them? Because I've heard, of course, we had the International People's Tribunal, which has raised some kind of awareness of 1965, but the Chinese Indonesians are still kind of, more silence in this. Has there been anything done, and what can we do in the future?
Yeah, I mean, they're still quite discreet. Yeah, even when I met one of my father's cellmate. Yeah, one of his cellmates, and he said to me, no, I'm going to talk to you, but don't mention my name. That was so common. Only a few of them are willing to open up. I mean, I'm one of them, I think, and Shinta Miranda is also one of them, but very rarely, because they still feel threatened, and they still feel that if the identities are revealed, that they're related to the 1965, then they will be stigmatized. Especially after what happened to Ahok. It was scary for other Chinese Indonesians, because they said, look at what happened to Ahok. He was a governor, for God's sake. He was powerful. And how about us? We're just ordinary people. What are they gonna, what are they gonna do to us? So that's what they're frightened of. But for me, if they keep getting frightened, if we don't start speaking up, then it will get worse as well. That's what I think. So that's why I just keep talking, I suppose.
Yes, because you also quite openly say that my father was a member of the PKI. Many Indonesians would never mention that, even though they know that.
No, they were frightened. I mean, not even if, even if they were persecuted, not because of the PKI, because like Shinta Miranda was also quite brave, actually. Shinta Miranda was about the only one who was willing to be open to me. The others were so frightened. Even my best friend, one of my best friends, actually, I approached her and she's kind of like, no, I don't want to talk to you about it. I approached her again and she just went, no, please don't. I don't want to talk to you about that, please. Yeah. We still have a good relationship, but no, not about that, she said. And that's why I don't want to mention her name, because she asked me not to reveal her identity. So that's why talking about Chinese Indonesian is like, in the end, I have to use a lot of pseudonyms. Yeah.
Do you actually know, the percentage of Chinese Indonesians that were prosecuted or perished during 1965?
Yes.
Yeah, how many? Can you just give us a number?
Oh no, I can't. I cannot say how many, because I haven't kind of like no. I haven't gone to like, the statistics. I haven't gone through that. Yeah. But it is also difficult because the data, even how many people were murdered, we don't even know. Okay. So they were really good at identifying, who should be murdered. But when they had to count, they didn't know. They were good at killing and not good at counting how many they murdered somehow. They can't be bothered. Yeah. They enjoyed the killing more, I suppose.
Yeah, actually, the Indonesian genocide, of course, has always been kind of, compared to the Holocaust in Europe. But then when we see more directly, because the Holocaust was actually, a persecution of minority groups. And this is actually, the Chinese-Indonesian were the minority groups in Indonesia. And this is kind of the aspect that closely resembles to the Holocaust.
Actually, it was crueler in Indonesia because Germany was more kind of like, they're more efficient in murdering people, right? They, in identifying the Jews, they were also kind of like more precise. They got the family tree, you know what I mean? They were quite systematic. Whereas Indonesia was not systematic, so they kind of killed anyone they could find. And in Germany, they had the systems like guessing. They guessing, or they had special system in doing the mass murder, which was quick. But in Indonesia, because they're not that systematic, so in a way, it's more brutal. Slow death, tortures, mutilation. Yeah. So it was more sadistic in the end.
Yeah.
Because it's not systematic. They're not that efficient in a way. And there was this fear, the communal fear. Because anyone could be victimized, right? In Germany, it was more clear in a way, or Jewish, somehow more clear. In Indonesia, anyone could be victimized. So somehow, if people are frightened, they did stupid things as well. They pointed their friends, they pointed even their family members of the family. I saw it, the brothers and sisters were pointing fingers against each other. It was sad. It was really sad.
Yeah, and this continues, right? Still today, this fear.
Yeah, continues.
It reminds me.
Yeah. And after the film, The Act of Killing, and actually I was interviewed by, I can't remember what TV channel, and they asked me, what's wrong with Indonesia? How could the people do that? And I said, well, it's not only Indonesian, is it? Who trained the people to do that? The Americans actually trained them, so it's not only just Indonesia, yeah. And the victims, you must remember, the victims are also Indonesians.
I see just in the chat that Shinta Miranda, you're here actually.
Oh, Shinta Miranda is here.
Do you want to maybe talk? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to ask questions to Shinta Miranda, you can. I mean, I think, like Shinta Miranda and I are somehow exceptions. Yeah, we keep talking.
Shinta Vani, right? Do you want to?
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Thank you. Hello. But my English is not good. Maybe someone will ask me question. Maybe Soe Tjen will translate it. Okay.
Okay, yes. And please now, the audience, please do ask questions. If you have any, just raise your hand or switch on your camera and ask to Soe Tjen or Miranda. Okay, Dr. Tjen, please.
Thank you so much, Ibu Veronica and Ibu Soe Tjen Marching. So my doctoral dissertation research is about Indonesian different heritage. Although the analysis of the time period of Indonesian different heritage is from 1511 until 1949, but I think the logic of different heritage can be used in 1965. I already also talk about this to Ibu Soe Tjen Marching. And I have discussed also with my professor, Professor Susanto Zudi, that the embedding of the word revolution in this context of revolution hero for me is not really inappropriate. So this means that we must admit that the victims were also from the PKI, and the Indonesian army and PKI for me were both victims, and this means that we have to be build a monument to also commemorate the victims from the PKI. So this is my point of view. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think, you know, we do not want to admit what happened in 1965, then this will continue. And the personnel's in a way related, yeah, what happened to East Timor, what happened to 98, what happened to Papua, you know, the rape by the Indonesian army actually kept happening. And that was because they let the 65 go. Yeah, they just ignored the 1965. And the history textbook still mentioned that, oh, it was the PKI coup, and yeah, it was still the history is still a lie.
Yeah. We have a question actually from in the chat box.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that the person wants to remain anonymous, but the question is the following. So if we say that the ethnicization of the Chinese-Indonesian minority was an important instrument in nation building process in the past, what group has taken its place today? What is the central reference point today in the creation of unity? Is there a danger that the Chinese minority will be instrumentalized again, or which groups are utilized today?
Yes, of course. It has happened actually in 1998. Yeah, happened in 1998. I think I don't know. Does anyone know? I think many people here know what happened in 98. Yeah, hundreds of Chinese Indonesian women were raped and tortured and also murdered. It happened, and not only in Jakarta and Solo, and it happened before actually several times during the New Order. It happened. The riot against Chinese Indonesian happened several times, not just in 98. And then again, Ahok. It's so the Chinese Indonesian was used as a scapegoat, as an easy scapegoat. And of course, this was related in 1965, because if 1965 is not admitted, it's not acknowledged, not discussed properly, this will keep happening, because it's still easy now to stigmatize the ethnic Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And even in relation to COVID-19, yeah, COVID-19 with a China virus in Indonesia was really a big thing. You know, they said that they claimed that it was because of China, it's communist, this is communist plot. It was communism started up again. And even Jokowi was accused as a communist, and for God's sake, Jokowi. And Jokowi was an interesting case, because Jokowi was accused as a communist, and to prove that it was not communist, then he sided with the other side, yeah, completely the other side. So he was actually now an honorary member of Pemuda Pancasila. Pemuda Pancasila was the group who took part in the mass murder of the communist people.
Well, if there are no other questions, but I want to ask maybe Soe Tjen if you can translate, but for Miranda, I'm just curious, like, why did she decide to speak out actually? How did she take the courage to do so? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Shinta, kenapa kok berani bicara? Kenapa alasannya?
Well, yeah. Saya terluka dengan situasi politik di tahun 65, yang di saat itu saya baru berumur 10 tahun dan melihat ayah saya digiring oleh tentara dan ibu saya diberhentikan dari Yayasan Katolik Atmajaya pada saat itu. Dan
so
kemudian,
I was hurt because I saw my father was taken to prison, and I I witnessed my mother being fired by the university in Jakarta at that time.
Ya, dan kemudian seiring waktu, ibu saya kemudian mendapat beasiswa dari British Council untuk ke Edinburgh. Tapi papa saya meninggal, dan mereka semua akhirnya menyusul ibu saya yang sudah selesai doktoralnya di Edinburgh itu kemudian ke Amsterdam. Dan adik-adik saya ditarik, papa saya sudah meninggal. Wah, saya merasa tidak ada gunanya juga saya ikut, saya tetap tinggal di Indonesia dengan segala kenangan saya kepada orang tua saya, terutama pada ayah saya yang meninggal setelah 6 tahun lumpuh, dan saya merasa suka tidak suka saya harus tinggal di Indonesia untuk bersuara.
Okay, so Shinta Miranda's mother, so my mother got a scholarship from the British Council to study in Edinburgh, and my father died after being paralyzed for 6 years. And my siblings followed my mother's overseas, and in the end they lived in Europe. But I decided to stay in Indonesia because I wanted to just keep the memory, and also, you know, to remain useful. I want to voice out what happened to myself.
Ya, saya mau cerita tentang ketika saya bersuara di satu Asian Literary Festival di Taman Ismail Marzuki. Ada seseorang yang mengambil suara saya dan kemudian dibuat YouTube. Kemudian saya dituduh sebagai anak PKI, anak Gerwani, dan itu beredar kemana-mana. Seandainya saya punya uang, saya akan tuntut mereka karena saya bukan komunis, tetapi saya difitnah seperti itu. Namun tak apa, saya akan tetap bersuara. Saya tidak pernah takut. Keluarga saya takut waktu itu, tapi saya akan tetap bersuara seperti itu. Saya bilang monumen Lubang Buaya yang memfitnah Gerwani sebagai pembunuh para jenderal itu harus dihancurkan karena itu fitnah luar biasa kepada kaum perempuan.
So one time I gave a talk in a forum in Jakarta, and I said that the monument in Lubang Buaya that slandered the left-wing women, Gerwani, had to be destroyed. And then people took my voice and then spread it on YouTube and accused me of being a PKI, of being communist and Gerwani, of left-wing woman, and they slandered me and they threatened me. But I will keep going. I'm not going to keep quiet. Actually, I saw the YouTube video when Shinta Miranda was slandered and threatened. It was scary, actually. I mean, both of us have been threatened, but I think Shinta Miranda has been threatened more because she lives in Indonesia. You know, it's easier for the people to threaten her than me. Yeah.
Yes, Shinta, it's a very, horrendous story, but thank you. Thank you for keep going and, speaking out on this topic.
You're welcome.
Actually, we are kind of, we just have a few more minutes left, but is there anyone who still has the last question? Okay, Andreas, please.
Hello, good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever everyone is. My name is Samantha. I'm here with my boyfriend, Andreas. I actually have a small question to Mr. Tjen Marching. It's an honor to meet you. So I have a question regarding the 1965 genocide. In the past few months, I've been reading quite a bit of paper, and some of them reject completely the existence of the 1965 genocide. One of them is written by Robert Cribb and Charles I. Copel, A Genocide That Never Was, explaining the myth of anti-Chinese massacres in Indonesia, of which the paper takes the conclusion that there has never been a systematic or structuralized violence against the Chinese Indonesian during the 1965 genocide, completely putting it as a quote-unquote myth. My question is, first, what is your response towards this notion that the 1965 genocide was a myth? And the second one is whether there is actually a scholarly debate within the scholarly community of whether the 1965 genocide is actually a genocide or not. Thank you.
Okay, whether it's 1965 genocide or not, there was an argument about this because genocide used to be related to like ethnicity, religion, you know, certain groups. I think you can see it on the UN. But recently, it was after the IPT 1965, actually, I was involved in that. They actually said that 1965 genocide was a genocide, and I always call it a genocide because political alliance had to be included in the term genocide. And in 1965 is the genocide of political alliance to the left. If you read Robert Cliff and Charles Koppel, I'm not sure whether they actually denied the 1965 genocide as such. They, I can't remember, but the 1965, I agree that the 1965 was not systematically against the ethnic Chinese. It's not. I didn't argue as such as well. It was not against the ethnic Chinese. I even denied it when, that's what I said. My family claimed it was against ethnic Chinese. The ethnic Chinese believed that it was against the ethnic Chinese. It wasn't, yeah. It was just the collateral impact. What happened to the ethnic Chinese? Just the collateral damage kind of thing. But it wasn't, there was no systematic genocide against the ethnic Chinese. No, there wasn't. But the Chinese community believed in this, yeah. Whether the possibility is they believed in it or they did not actually believe in it, but it was an easier narrative to tell rather than claiming that it was against the communists, because the word communist was banned. So it was easier for them to tell about the 65 as against the ethnic Chinese, because the word ethnic Chinese was still mentioned anyway among the community, and there was racism in the new order. So it matched. The 1965 match, yeah, if they talk about whatever 1965 against ethnic Chinese, easy, sorted. Whereas if they talk about it's against the communist left-wing people, oh my goodness. And then you talk more about communists and left-wing, it was not allowed in the new order, even now. Even now, any teaching, any mention of the communists, whatever, is not allowed. Yeah, although people keep mentioning it. So it was just an easier narrative for them.
Thank you, Soe Tjen. Did this kind of answer your question? Okay. There is a question by Ran in the chat box. Did the publication of Pramodya Ananta's third book, she's a very famous literaturist, but and the screening of Joshua Oppenheimer's films actually made the reception of books like yours easier? Do you think so?
Definitely, definitely. I think, in fact, I actually, Joshua Oppenheimer's film in a way pushed me to write, because before then my mother asked me not to say anything and not to write about what happened to my father. She said to me, no, never ever mention it, never ever write about it. I kept talking about it, but I didn't write because I was respecting my mother. But after watching Joshua Oppenheimer's film, The Act of Killing, I thought, if I keep quiet, then it's not good, is it? This will continue. After watching that film, that's what I was thinking. It was actually strange, because after watching that film, I understood my mother's fear more, because that film just seems so real. Yeah, my mother's fear seems so real in that film. I knew what my mother was facing, and I completely understand why she's still frightened. I mean, it's scary what she had to face. I completely understand her. I sympathize with her fully, but at the same time, the urge to speak up is getting bigger. And for me, if I don't speak up, nothing will change. Everything will remain the same. So I think, you know, I sympathize with my mother, but I just said to my mother, I'm sorry. I really have to speak up. I really am sorry. I mean, it's sad for me to speak up, because, you know, if I'm threatened by people, I can say, fuck you, right? And I can ignore them. But how about my own mother? when she asked me not to speak up. It is sad for me, in a way. Yeah, that I have to be against my own mother when I'm speaking up. It's sad, and that's what many people have to experience when they're speaking up. It's not the government, it's not the threat sometimes, it's their own families.
Yeah, but thank you for speaking up, because not yet so many are speaking up, actually. Unfortunately, we have to end this event because we already are going over time. So I'm just going to hand over to Ingrid to wrap up. And personally, also thanks everyone for joining, and thank you for Soe Tjen for this really wonderful presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. And we would love to stay longer to ask any more questions, but unfortunately, we have to end. And I want to thank you again, Soe Tjen Marching, for sharing your insights and personal story, because it was really a personal story you told here. And I would highly encourage everyone to read her books and stay updated on her work. And
unfortunately, the novel has not been translated yet, but all I can say is the work of fiction can be more real than fact. You know, from what I said, you can see that it can be, it can have deeper insight.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, for everyone that speaks Indonesian, they can read it now, and for the rest of us, we'll have to wait. And finally, I want to say that this was a Correspondents of the World organized event, and at Correspondents of the World, we provide a safe space for people to tell their stories, and we would really like to hear yours as well. So do not hesitate to reach out to us to continue this discussion or to get involved. And our aim is to foster dialogue between people through our personal stories. And if you want to see more events like this and other types of events, please follow us also in social media and for more community events. So thank you so much, everyone. This event will be uploaded on our channels, and I wish you all a great day, and hope we'll see you again sometime for another event.
Oh, great evening in Indonesia, and Soe Tjen, a good flight to Canada as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's lots of thank yous coming in the chat. And thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And I wish you, a great, or not a great
I think
time
it went
ahead, but a
well,
good
and,
flight.
Yeah, I'm glad Shinta came and give a talk as you know, like answered questions as well, which is quite good.
Yeah,
and,
that was amazing.
You know, Muazzam Malik was here. Muazzam Malik was he used to be the ambassador to Indonesia, the British ambassador to Indonesia.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, Muazzam Malik. I just saw. He said, "Thank you. This is Muazzam." It's Muazzam Malik. I just realized it was there. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, there were many familiar faces to you, maybe.
Yeah, but he's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you also have to.
Yeah.
To fly, literally.
Yeah. All right then. Thank you so much. Thank you, Veronica. Thanks, Ingrid. And how do I pronounce your name? Is it Janosch? Is it?
It is, yeah.
Janosch. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Is Shinta still here? Is it? No, Shinta is gone.
No, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
I better go now,
yes.
and then I'm going to get
thank you so much.
flight because I'm going to fly to Canada soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
thanks
everything.
a
We'll
lot.
keep in touch.
Thanks.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Tech support is working hard to close the meeting.
No. Yeah, no, it's over. Oh, you're waiting for me to close it? Okay.
It's also still recording, so you can just stop it.
Sure, I'm working on everything. That's why.